Thank you. Thank you for joining us for our 15th annual forum, our first virtual forum. This morning's session's experiential experiences and lightning talks were just amazing. So many passionate practitioners sharing with us how they're adapting to COVID-19. All presenters. Now it's a pleasure to introduce the moderator of our keynote session. But first, a word about why we call it our keynote and a little further background about this special session. At our planned in-person forum, we were thrilled that our keynote was the legendary Rasheed Davis, the founding principal of P-Tech Schools. Many of you know of Rasheed and can appreciate what an awesome keynote he represents, a truly passionate school leader. We were also thrilled about this year's Leaders That Can Award honorees, Ken Bouyer from Ernst & Young, Andy Cohen from Gensler, and Christina Lewis from All-Star Code. A word first about these awards. Each year at Schools That Can, we recognize local leaders who show the moral courage to give back to their communities. These are exceptional leaders. We award them our Schools That Can Leader That Can Award, and in part because these leaders appreciate the value of service. By their examples, they are role models who understand what dividends accrue to their organizations from giving back. We hope to present these awards in person at an appropriate time soon in the future. In the meantime, we've asked our honorees to join Rasheed in what we believe will be an inspiring conversation relevant to our times. We're excited about this special session. The title of our keynote session is So What Changes Post-COVID-19? Here again, we have an opportunity to explore the impact of the pandemic from the perspective of these extraordinary leaders. You're in for a real treat. And who better to moderate this discourse than Grace Sue, Vice President of Education at IBM, and I'm proud to say also a board member of Schools That Can. Grace, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Michael, and it's an honor to serve as a board member of Schools That Can, in large part because of your tireless leadership in strengthening the education to employment pipeline. So thank you very much for all you're doing on behalf of young people across the United States. I'm especially grateful today to serve as the moderator for this powerhouse group of speakers. It's quite an eclectic group that we have here today. But what we all share is a commitment to the education to employment pipeline in very distinct ways, as well as a commitment to strengthening the social fabric of our society. So as Michael said, our session is entitled, So What Changes Post-COVID-19? And a little bit of a spoiler alert here because the answer is everything. It's hard to think of anything that has been left untouched by the pandemic. Individuals, schools, nonprofits, companies have all had to react quickly and pivot. So in the longer term, what we can all be sure of is that we are going to return to the quote-unquote new normal. And we're all in various stages of evolving to this new reality. But in this change is opportunity. And that's really where this session is going to be discussing today. How do we ensure that the changes that result from the pandemic will ultimately strengthen our society as a whole? Our speakers today will share their perspectives on the challenges they are facing as leaders and provide their unique insight on how to manage this change deliberately and with long-range, big-scale benefits. So before we start and introduce our panel today, I just want to go over some ground rules, which is I encourage you all to ask questions. I understand that all the other sessions were quite vibrant and we want this one to be as well. So please make good use of the chat and we will try to answer questions either along the way or save them to the end. And with that, I have the honor of introducing our 4 speakers. First, as you heard from Michael, we have Rasheed Davis. Rasheed is my friend and founding principal of P-Tech Brooklyn. P-Tech Brooklyn is an innovative grades 9 through 14 school. Students have the opportunity to graduate with both their high school diploma and an industry-recognized 2-year associate's degree, as they also participate in things like mentorship and paid internship. We also have Christina Lewis. Christina is the founder and president of All Star Code, a nationally recognized New York-based nonprofit organization fostering entrepreneurial talent for primarily Black and Hispanic boys in high school. We also have Ken Bouyer. Ken, I'm glad you made it. Ken is the America's Director of Inclusiveness Recruiting at Ernst & Young, which is, as we all know, a global professional services company. And finally, last but not least, we have Andy Cohen. Andy is the co-CEO of Gensler, which is the world's largest architectural firm and one lauded by Fast Company as one of the world's most innovative companies. So with that, I'm going to turn first to Rasheed. Rasheed, as a founding principal of P-Tech, you've been a champion for equity and inclusion in education. The pandemic has highlighted how far we have to go. Black and brown communities are being hit the hardest by the virus, and with schools moving to distance learning, disparities between the haves and have-nots are being laid bare. Rasheed, we'd love to hear from you what you're seeing on the ground in Crown Heights. What are the greatest challenges you're facing? And from your perspective, what are the critical steps that need to be taken now by government, education, and the private sector working together to evolve schools for a post-COVID world?
Thank you, Grace, for the introduction, and I'm really thrilled to be here. I would be remiss if I did not, first and foremost, make sure that I elaborate a little bit about the reality of P-Tech being the intersection of high school, college, and industry. And when we look at high school, we know the reality of thinking of P-Tech Brooklyn specifically. We are approximately 70% Black male in population of our student demographics. And so when you look at high school, college, and industry, we know that Black males lag behind of high school graduation. We know that Black males lag behind in enrollments in terms of college, and definitely that enrollment has led to the numbers not being as high in STEM degree completers. And so the work that we have done inside the building and creating a culture that has allowed our students to complete high school and colleges at higher rates than the norm definitely has been upended by the remote learning of COVID-19. Many students have really checked out because, you know, school is an escape. The building itself is a place where even after deaths, many students have returned the next day because it is a different type of support reality. And just the challenges of bandwidth and technology alone make it that much more difficult because of space. You know, many of our students, you're talking about more than 60% on free and reduced lunch. And so we're not talking about space where everyone has a room of their own in terms of to be able to deal with the trauma of poverty, the trauma of losing loved ones as a result of COVID-19, to really understand how this blended world of high school, college, and industry really has manifested over the years. And so we're challenging. Our school community is doing its best that they can. We're very, very happy that, you know, New York City has made the attempt to have a device in everyone's home who needed one, but still the remote learning is a huge challenge, particularly for our world that is so much hands-on to making sure that we can create that culture that helps students see completion of high school, college, and enrollment in terms of to companies like IBM at the end of the journey of college completion. So we're struggling. We're being honest about that. We're being hard on ourselves as well because we want students and families to be able to maximize this opportunity. But we also know the challenges of people dying are greater than what we can control. What gives us hope is that during this reality, we do have students who are finishing four-year degrees. We have students who've finished a master's degree. And so we do have evidence that the skills that we have provided students can allow them to finish high school, can allow them to finish a two-year STEM degree, but also can prepare them to finish a four-year degree and even a master's. And so it is upon those equity outcomes that I really am hopeful that the challenges of remote learning will only make us stronger. And so I think the greatest challenge in all of this really is myself, because my having to be 3 to 5 steps ahead and my wanting, the students really to maximize this opportunity, me not being able to hug them, me not being able to really pop into a classroom or in the hall stairwell to move along their way, has really aged me. This white on my face and on my head will be whiter here, I'm sure, by the time we are actually able to go back into the building. I remain hopeful that during opportunities like this, that the world will see the challenges of inequity, and we all will come out better on the opposite side of this, willing to be a little bit more compassionate about work, school, and the opportunities that are not afforded to all.
Thank you so much, Rashid. I'm going to move on to Christina. Christina, let me just get my question here. Christina, All Star Code's mission is to create a pipeline of young men of color with the skills, networks, and know-how to thrive in tech. Your programs rely on instruction, but also, much like PTech, mentorship, site visits, and community building. All in-person activities. What is All Star Code doing in response to COVID?
Yes, thank you, Grace. And Rashid, you're a hard act to follow. I really admire what PTech has done, and it's inspiring. We are All Star Code's programs is the flagship is an intensive summer program that recruits students from all over, primarily in the New York City region, and brings them into inside a company for a 6-week immersive experience where they not only learn to code, but also have a one-on-one mentorship lunch, visit every week other technology companies in the area with the goal of inspiring them to take that hard path of studying computer science in high school and on in college, as well as to sort of expand their mind about the opportunities available in the 21st century. When I conceived of the organization 7 years ago, I felt there really was a disconnect between young men of color and 21st century employment, not just in skills, but also in sort of values and mindset. And so we work to foster that connection in person. And there are so many similarities to PTech. We have been rewarded in our students going on to software engineering roles. Only a handful have graduated, but 5 of the 8 are actually practicing software engineers at Google, at Facebook, at Carvana, and others. And we have a very high college rate. So that is, like with Rashid, real evidence that that what we're doing is working. And while and at least for our students with full-time jobs, they still have those jobs since they are they are in technology at technology companies. That said, from a programmatic perspective, we're trying to, honestly, we're still figuring out and are concerned about how we're going to even come close to building the kind of community that we've had before virtually. On our, in our classrooms, there were team building activities every morning, bonding activities, discussions about, about privilege, about race, things that are really hard to imagine having via Zoom. We're hopeful that that we're creating technical tools to create that space and also using existing ones, Slack, for example, as part of the communication vehicle for our students is Slack. And that's a community building software tool. We're looking to create sort of like virtual spaces, virtual walls where the students can kind of put Post-its up that express their ideas. But it's a challenge. So far, we've had students continue to accept going to the program, and we've said it's going to be virtual. But we'll see what engagement we get once the summer actually begins. The day is usually 7 hours. We've shortened that to 3 hours of instruction, just being realistic. We also, but there are opportunities. This is making us giving us a chance to be more targeted about evaluation of the students and perhaps more personalized learning, which is a big opportunity in online education. We're using some polling tools that can give real-time assessments to our instructional staff about how the students are doing. So that's exciting. And we've also been lucky enough. I'll say another thing we're concerned about is fundraising. And I'm sure everyone is as well. We significantly cut our budget. We've actually we gave up our office and are now intending to be a virtual workforce, through the rest of the year at least, to prepare for that. So that is a concern too. I hope so. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. I think that's very helpful to understand the challenges that both you and Rasheed are facing in this sort of informal and informal education space. I'm wondering for both of you, before I move on to our next speakers, do you see the distance learning space as something that will become more embedded in your work over the course of time? How do you see that role? Maybe it's too early to say, but in this new normal, and as we all adjust, is that going to be a factor in your work moving forward? And how do you create a culture that enables both in-person learning as well as really making those wrappers, those online meeting rooms that you talked about, Christina? How do you make them really vibrant and meaningful and enable the kind of social emotional learning and supports that students really need?
Tina, I'll let you go first.
Okay. Well, as a program that's always been designed to be intensive for a part of the year in the summer, but then we have the rest of our program year-round has been about developing an online community. So we've graduated 600 students, and we've said we offer programming year-round, but it's pop-up. So it's been delivered. We connect the students virtually, but they've always then come together in person with pop-up events. But we are thinking, is there a way that we can continue teaching? So yes, absolutely. We're thinking that there are ways to expand our reach through distance learning, through online education. We had a plan to expand to other cities to 5 different cities, and now that feels very, that plan feels like 1,000 years ago as we look to this distance learning world. So there are opportunities for us to think beyond geography. I do think it will be tough to maintain, to really maintain that online community if there aren't in-person opportunities for people to come and refresh and recharge and really get to know each other. I think I don't see how that's. Honestly, I don't know that that's possible. I think once people have a connection, the online world can be a way in, and it can be a way to stay in touch, but without the IRL, without being able to bring this in real life, it's hard.
Yeah.
We've always incorporated blended learning in our curriculum, and so many students from our 9th grade experience have that opportunity because of the online folders that they have. It's just now you're talking about a different type of time frame. So I do believe that we will definitely see more of this incorporated. College students also already have used some aspect of blended learning, remote learning, but I think now all of us will definitely benefit from being able to move forward when we do return to the school building with virtual learning, and we see that many companies are working from home. So I think it's even great that students are experiencing this and experiencing it publicly, that the reality that whether it's remote learning or remote work, this is part of the future. And so we will definitely be able to learn and benefit more as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you both. I'm going to move to Ken. Ken, you are one of the country's corporate leaders in talent recruitment and workforce diversity. The students that Rashid and Christina work with every day, they not only need education opportunity, but they absolutely need economic opportunity as well. We are at a very challenging time, potentially, as many economists think, either in a global recession or on the verge of one. And in this very challenging time for companies, how can they stay focused on building inclusive workforces? And what role will companies play beyond their own employee base in building a diverse and inclusive company?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, great to be here. And thank you for that. Just a little bit of a shameless plug about EY. So to your point, we are a large professional services firm, global firm that is, and about 280,000 people around the world. So we're a pretty big organization. We do audit, we do tax, we do consulting work, and a whole host of things. Those of you online, check us out, ey.com, so if you want to learn more about who we are. But just great comments by Rashida and Christina. Thank you for sharing that. I do think challenges, in fact, I live in New Jersey, so I'm at home. I usually use Zoom. So but my wall is not green in my office, but it's actually a green screen. I usually project a virtual background. With this technology, I hadn't figured out how to do it. So that's why I see my little green screen in the background. It is about adjustments, I think. To Rashid's comment, we're working from home now. And, I personally usually travel a great deal for the firm and doing the role that I do. And that's really trying to make EY a very diverse organization from every aspect of diversity that you can think of. I do think a few things. I think for organizations, given where we are with this pandemic, I think people will be tested. Organizations will be tested around, are they truly invested in D&I? I think that's first and foremost. I mean, obviously, organizations are trying to survive and do what they need to do, but we're fortunate large organizations like us are obviously very hunkered down, but the one thing that we continue to engage in and focus on is D&I. So let's see these organizations that claim they care about this issue. I'm going to be brutally honest because that's who I am. Let's see if they continue to stay steadfast. Obviously, we all make adjustments as we go. Let's see who's really in this thing for the long haul. To give you an example, I agree. So we work with All Stars. There's a number of organizations at the high school level that the firm works with in trying to work and get students to go to college so we can hire them. We will have several thousand interns start with us this summer virtually. We have a huge internship program, but we decided to not renege on any offers. So the way we're trying to invest and be committed is if we've committed to you and you have an offer with the firm, you're going to work with us. So we're in the midst of building a virtual internship experience. I'll let you guys know next year how it works out. We've got great people working on it. I'm sure it'll be good. So to the extent we continue to employ folks like coming from All Stars, that's our goal and our objective. How do we work with organizations to make sure we are a bridge and that we can give folks who need employment, and we're doing that. We have a huge foundation. We're going to help a number of our interns who are in some financial distress to help them get back to college. So the way we can commit is use our big resources, our skills. We've got a lot of people in our firm, have a lot of skills. So we're actively involved in our communities, the broadband issue, and there's so many things going on that as a firm we can help consult. I am personally working with a lot of diverse organizations who are moving from a large virtual conference or a large conference to a virtual conference now. So I'm my background, I'm an accountant, I'm an audit guy, I'm a consultant. So I'm actually working with these organizations and consulting with them on how do they figure out what's next for them. So Christina, to your comment about growth and how do we do that, the one thing I would say to you is don't give up on the growth idea. I think now is the time for organizations to frankly recalibrate, think about how will they survive and grow in this new normal. And so I think I'd encourage you to continue to think about how you're going to grow the organization. There are a lot of firms like ours out there who want to help young people and who know that the young folks are our future. And as a firm, we've been investing in that space for many, many years. And as long as I'm here, we're going to continue to do that as well. So that's how we can help. That's how we're going to continue to invest. And looking forward to doing this together in this new abnormal.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Ken. I'm going to turn to Andy. Andy, you are a leading voice on the future of cities. One of the things that the pandemic has underscored is how much schools are really the centerpiece of our communities. They are educating students, but in many places they're also providing food and social services. Would you please share your perspective on how design has a unique and profound impact in making a positive difference in the world? And also, please share the pandemic's impact on redefining the future of our cities and education, and the challenges and opportunities for positive change.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you so much. And it's really an honor to be on this panel with my fellow panel mates. Fantastic to work with you. You know, like Ken, we're a global company. So we have, we have many people right now around the world. And what we found is just really quickly is we found in China that we learned early in January when this pandemic was breaking out, how this pandemic would, feel its way out throughout the world. And so we were able to learn early. We had to send our people home in China early, and we learned to get all our drawings up on the cloud so that we could plug in around the globe and be able to function as an organization. I think today I can add a little bit of value here discussing the global challenges, how this is a global pandemic, not just about the US, but around the world. And we have been focused on redefining the future of cities and also framing the future of education. It's interesting, this is a milestone moment, a pivot point in the history and the future of the world around COVID-19 and its unbelievable impacts. I really respect Michael Druckmann for putting on this whole event and Schools That Can, and really all about where real world success begins, connecting education to employment. And early on I saw, it was incredible, the Schools That Can programs. I saw the design day that 90% of the participants learned to use design thinking as a way towards the future. And that's design thinking is how we are really redefining cities. And that's connecting the dots to the kids of today and really thinking strategically about the future of our cities. Every day we're impacting millions upon millions of people's lives, how they live, how they educate, how we work, and how we play. And we're focused, really, really focused in on the human experience. And what we've clearly learned all together working from home is sitting on these what I call Hollywood Squares TV screens, is that yes, we're connecting, but we're not viscerally connecting. And that's what the students also, and it's about the human connection. It's about the human response on those visceral connections that are so important. My firm has been focusing on global challenges, significant, major global challenges. And clearly COVID-19 is a major global challenge. And that's about the health and safety and the welfare of the globe. But also it's a precursor, and this is a real warning for us about climate change. And climate change in the next 10 years is going to be defined. How we respond to COVID-19 is also the response on how we're going to respond to climate change. It is about the health, global health global safety, and climate change. And the schools of the future, I really want to point out, are going to be all about sustainability. Most of the schools we design the next 5 years are going to call net zero. And net zero means they're not going to use any energy. They're going to generate their own energy. There are major issues coming upon us, like rising seawaters on our coastal cities that we're going to have to deal with, and our schools that are in those zones. The next major issue is urbanization and densification. And clearly, cities are getting a really, really bad rap right now, because we believe it's not about density, it's about crowding. It's about crowding. And what we're seeing is, and it's proving its way out in cities like Minneapolis and Boston and New York, people are now spilling out onto streets. Streets are closed. Miles and miles of streets are closed. And people are now using our streets as places to walk, to stroll, to bike, to get out in the outside environment. And so it's really this idea of repurposing our cities, because the cities were created around cars, and streets are so wide, there's not enough sidewalks for people. And so what we've been thinking about is calling it the 15-minute city. And that's the ability that our schools, our retail, our residential, our shopping districts, within a 15-minute urban village districts, within cities within our cities, and the ability for people to stroll and bike and be able to be in vicinity of those areas. And it's really about the rebalancing of our future of our cities, where we're also working with many companies right now on the future of the driverless car. And that's a major technology that's coming our way within the next 10 to 15 years. It's going to redefine our cities. But think about it, all the parking that exists on our streets will no longer be there. We're going to be able to take that parking back for our urban environment, for walkability, for restaurants, outdoor amenity space, and so forth. What's really key when I pivot to education is, we did a couple of different surveys really quickly, and a couple of great surveys. One survey we did was for parents of children going to school in general across the United States. Would you send your kids back to school, K through 12, right now? Right now. And the answer we've got back were 36% yes, 20% said maybe, and 44% said no. And I think that statistic alone says that we all have to get our schools prepared for the idea of this uncertainty and how we're going to design our cities as people come back into the space. Also, another great survey we just did that really tells about our workers, and where Ken and I are in the professional world, is work from home survey. Will you go back to work, right? Will you go, or you're going to work from home? 12% people said they want to work from home permanently. 38% said they want to work 1 to 3 days a week in a hybrid situation where you'll work from home. 50% of workers said they still want to go back to the office. One of the key determinations of whether they're going to go back to the office is childcare in schools. And schools are going to drive that decision of whether people are going to be able to go back to work, and whether our schools are going to truly open up, and obviously childcare. You know, the pandemic, and I think Rasheed said it really, really well, the pandemic has laid bare the inequities in our education system and the shift to online distance learning. And Rasheed said it well, so I won't go into depth. The idea, you know, are there computers for everyone? The lack of student connection, the lack of engagement, and privacy and personal space for students. So and I believe what Rasheed and Christina said, I believe this is hybrid of learning environments, in person and online distance learning. And so as architects and designers, we believe we have to design spaces that can do both. So the classrooms of the future are going to be about having these hybrid spaces where you're going to have cameras and microphones and displays, so that from home it becomes a real environment, and when you're real time, it's a real environment. You know, create real experiential learning opportunities, a setting that supports dynamic, collaborative, learner-centered process. So what are the devices to do that? Creating agile classrooms. We're going to have to create this whole flexible and adaptable to meet the changing needs, sizing for different configurations, creating space-based activities for individual or clustered spaces, not seated rows in a row, but clustered environments. Flexible spaces for creating enhanced learning to spur motivation around, you know, multi-purpose spaces for hands-on and project-based activities. Dynamic curated spaces that promote soft skills and communication skills. And finally, what really important is the school is community. The school is culture. spaces like the cafeteria and the gym and the library, we thought for flexibility and adaptability in the idea that not just tables and chairs in a cafeteria, but places for people to really gather and interact with each other. So that just gives you a little insight into what we're seeing in the education field and the future of cities.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much, Andy. I'll just say, at IBM, we are big proponents of design thinking. We're also practitioners of design thinking, and really do believe that it's so important to have that user-centric focus in order to be able to create real impact. So many questions. I know we're getting a lot in the chat too. I want to kind of circle back a little bit, and I think what I'm hearing a lot from all of you as speakers is this idea of inclusion, and I want to follow that thread a little bit. Rasheed, I want to start with you, come back to you, and you had talked a lot about how you actually were the challenge. I just want to say that I disagree because I know you and you're a visionary and you're somebody pushing the way forward. I think what this panel really demonstrates is how important ecosystems are. That, you have to be able to have formal education. You've got to have the nonprofit sector involved, and you have to have companies involved, and you have to think really writ large about how do we create more inclusive economies and inclusive spaces, not segregated ones. So, Rasheed, I want you to, if you could, talk a little bit about how you think government education and the private sector are going to need to evolve post-COVID.
Well, I'm going to have to push back about me being the challenge, because as we talk about inclusivity, people who look like me, Black males, are less than 10% of the education force. And so people are not used to Black or even excellence coming from people who look like me at higher levels. And so when we think of also the reality of taking populations like PTEC that are not academically screened or tested for admission, some people have no clue about students of color unless they're from gifted and talented populations. And so therefore, if they're, whether it's college or industry, if their dealings are only with high performing people of color, they may not be as inclusive, they may not be as tolerant, they may not be as wanting to partner with students who do not fit those models. And so I think governments, I think industry, I think colleges really do need to understand public-private partnerships moving forward, and not public-private partnerships only for the gifted and talented populations. That's why I think New York City, during this the pandemic, really has a great opportunity with 9 PTECs in New York City. Mayor de Blasio has an excellent opportunity to work with businesses to be able to say, look, PTEC Brooklyn is the global epicenter of an education reform here in our midst, that have produced college graduates, that have produced college graduates that have gone on to be hired by IBM. So we must be willing to look at pipelines and innovations that may not necessarily come from the populations that we're used to, in order for really to form an inclusive work environment and form an inclusive college going reality.
Thank you, Rasheed. Christina, similarly, I'm interested in really understanding how you're reaching out from education to employment. So how you're working with companies, with policymakers in that community building perspective that you really talked about, in order to be able to create a seamless pipeline, this education to employment pipeline that Schools That Can is so focused on.
In our model, companies invest in the students at the high school level, and establish direct mentorship relationships with executives at those companies. Then they become those mentors are then organically a part of the community, and everyone the mentors know now becomes part of the students' community. We have a portal It's our own portal, but that's designed to be kind of a clearinghouse for all these members of the community to then provide the students with enriching opportunities. And the idea being, so now students can log in, and this was pre-COVID, but log in and see different internship opportunities. We do offer priority to the companies that have funded our high school program, but that's how. So it's the pipeline of first education, internships. Companies in some cases do have an opportunity to design, to influence the curriculum of what's taught to the cohort that's embedded within their company. But then, so that's how we've done it. It's really through a programmatic partnership that becomes funded. We are now in this new reality, looking for new ways to do that. We're exploring, let's see, how to still facilitate interaction between the students and and working professionals, between the students and working environments. But we're still thinking that through. But really interested in finding new ways to partner with companies as well as schools to grow. Oh, and Ken, I really appreciate your advice to grow, to grow in the challenge. That's very inspiring.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ken, you're getting some shout outs here in the chat, I see. Everybody wants internships. Can Ernst & Young provide internships for students with disabilities who may be on the autism spectrum? That's, that's a great burden in a way. Maybe burden isn't the right one, but it's a great responsibility. And we too at IBM feel that and want to make sure that we can support as many young people as possible, but we can't do it alone. So, what are the ways that we can encourage other businesses to step up to the plate? Rasheed and Christina are reaching out to them, but what is it? Is it, how do we help them have kind of self-enlightenment in order to be able to move forward?
Yeah, a few things. Yeah, I've been chatting back and forth with folks. I think a couple of things. We are full this summer for internships. Unfortunately, our goals are all reached. But EY.com, under our careers page, is where you can go to apply. Those of you who may be looking for non-entry level jobs, you can apply there. But next year, we're going to have a number of internship opportunities. So put your resume, apply. From a disability standpoint, we call it accessibilities in the firm, and we have a big push around working and engaging that workforce. I mentioned on the chat, Lime Connect is a really good organization that really works with individual with disabilities. There are a number of firms like ours who are connected. There are many job opportunities there. So I think part of it, candidly, is there's so many people and organizations that are willing to help, and half the battle is finding them, right? So I think, when we have an opportunity to talk like this, to introduce people to organizations and companies who actually care about this issue, I think that's half the battle. Then ask, raise your hand. There's a great quote I read the other day. It said, "Don't let your situation or circumstances dictate your future results." And I think that's the moment that we're in, right? All of us have had defining moments in our lives, and thank God we've gotten through them. But I think you've got to persevere. I grew up in Queens. Rasheed, all those things. Public schools, although I went to a Catholic high school, but public schools all the way, the black male who probably shouldn't have made it, but through a lot of people helping. I'm a member of this organization. It's called the National Association of Black Accountants, and our motto is simply to lift as you climb. And so I've had a number of people, frankly, over my 30 years in the firm, help lift me. Now I think so many of us need to make sure we're carrying that forward and we continue to lift others. And so I think we do that by being advocates. That's why the role I'm in at the firm, I've become an advocate. I get to talk to, whether it's IBM or Google, we have so many clients that we serve. Many will come to us and ask, "Hey, Ken, what can we do in the D&I space?" And you guys at EY have been at it for so long, help me. I talk about organizations. I talk about they should give their time, their treasure as well, right? Because both are important. And I think we need people like us on this panel who are advocates, who care, have passion about these people, young people in particular, to make sure we help them amplify their voice. And so I think that's how a number of us within our respective organizations can do it. And then I think the people who are on this call, the students, my message to you, right? So there's so many organizations like NABA, like Alpha, Ascend, but you have a piece to do, because in the spirit of lifting as we climb, you've got to make sure your hand is high enough so that we can lift you. And your hand being high enough, frankly, is about you focusing on school. In spite of the challenges that we have today, you got to make sure you are disciplined and show up to class virtually. You're studying, you're staying focused. I have a 15-year-old high school daughter, and she is so focused on school. And I ask her every day, how's school? Let's talk about homework. So parents, stay on top of your kids. It just happens to be virtual, but people still have to learn. But we've got to all lift as we climb. So that is my message.
I think, Grace, it's important also that all of us really mentoring. We haven't said, I don't think mentoring came up, but mentoring is important to all of us. And I think that, moving forward, that becomes even more important in terms of how we can make sure mentoring really has a role in the space for partnerships.
And that's so inspiring. Thank you. I'll add to that. I love your lifting hand. Your hand has to be high enough so we can lift you. And of course, lift as you climb. We also believe in, for those that are climbing, though, continued humility and also the necessity for lifelong learning. So, and even as you're an active professional and, myself as a founder, I also think, okay, what can I continue learning right now? It's not just about the hand down, but also let me make sure that I'm modeling, a learning mindset and being teachable. And I think that's just also important as educators to remember. That was for me.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I know Rasheed, a number of students who are graduating from P-Tech schools coming to work at IBM are now giving back to rising P-Tech students, serving as mentors and sometimes internship coaches as well. So that's really, really great and inspiring. Ken, I wish my son were down here so he could absorb a little bit of that inspiration. Andy, I wanted to, before we go over and see some of the questions coming from the audience, and I'm just curious, this idea of how do you design for inclusion? Is that, I don't know if things that you're seeing around the world that really encourage that as we see more and more schools segregated over time.
I was going to jump in before about that because I absolutely believe it's about architecture is all about inclusiveness. And we're seeing that on projects around the world. I'll give an example of one we just completed recently in Los Angeles for the Weisburn School. And the big idea on the school is to create an environment that's like a college campus or even like a working environment that you're in an office. And so what it does is it's open, it's light, it's area, it has glass. The center of the building is an atrium where all the kids can walk up and meet collaboratively like an open office plan within a modern office building. But the idea of including different groups, of creating different work areas, there's no classrooms, there's no hallways. It's all open and collaborative space, all dynamic space where you have different clusters, different learning environments, the different types of groups getting together. And it becomes this really experiential type of moment and a great deal of collaboration and dynamism with the kids in the space. They feel like it's their space. If they're not coming to a building, they really feel like they're creating the space, and the space changes over time. And so that's an example of inclusive architecture, where it really is about collaboration, dynamism, bringing people together in an experiential environment. Not the cookie cutter classrooms with rows of chairs and the teacher in the front, but the space is constantly evolving and changing.
That's wonderful. I think, this idea of space as being a foundation for creating culture, a culture of inclusivity and not just assimilation is so important. If there's not any comments from the panel, I'll move over and take some questions here from the audience that I see popping up. So I think this is a great question. Could there be a way in for students that doesn't require the normal channels of the business world? If so, how? If not, would you be willing to create one? I love this question because we're thinking about that at IBM. We are very much invested in new collar opportunities. They're not blue collar jobs or white collar jobs, but they are jobs that value skills over degrees and pedigree. And working to fill jobs based upon what people actually are bringing to the table. So I'm going to toss that question out there and see who'd like to answer that.
I can jump in and just please.
No, go ahead.
Go. I was just going to jump in and say, what we're seeing is this incredible opportunities in front of us based, unfortunately, on what's going on right now. But this idea, like we mentioned, about climate change and green job opportunities, massive retooling in the United States towards green economy. What we're seeing through this COVID right now is this whole idea of supply chain interruption and localization versus globalization, and the opportunities to really create jobs around localization and creating, obviously you saw it with the PPE and so forth, but so many potential jobs where we're bringing them back to our local communities and it's not overseas. So tremendous opportunity. And then clearly in technology, most of this hour has been covering about how technology is revolutionizing education, and clearly there are technology jobs where, we're working with AR and VR and all kinds of different new tools that are about us in the training and education of our students towards those opportunities.
Andy, that's great. I think access is a really good question, and Grace, I love what you're doing here at IUVM, but I do think technology, I know there's sometimes challenges as we talked about with getting access to technology, but just to give you a real life example, I think from the firm side, we have a number of recruiters, but we can't go to every university. We recruit at a bunch of colleges around the country. But through our website, through the ability for any student to apply for jobs online, right, so much of it's about access. So I think while traditionally, if we didn't go to your quote unquote school, we may never meet you, may never know who you are. But through technology and social media, things like LinkedIn and other channels, now we're accessing people, students, resumes, professionals that we would have never seen, never met, never known about, right? So I think it's important to be engaged on this. Obviously, the technology is really critical. I think the reach of organizations will continue to evolve and change. And everything we're doing now is virtually, right? No choice. So I think that gives a lot of folks an opportunity, if you're ready for it, obviously, and if you throw your hat in the ring, so to speak.
I think we have to also be honest about progress over politics. I think because, when we look at, we're coming on a 10-year anniversary of the announcement of P-TECH, but P-TECH was started when Mayor Bloomberg was the mayor, and Mayor de Blasio, of course, campaigned on that almost everything that Bloomberg did was wrong. And so I don't think if you did a Google search right now, would you find P-TECH coming off the mouth of Mayor de Blasio. So we need to be honest that progress should, triumph over politics. And so when you're talking about working with businesses, if the leadership isn't really spearheading that, then you can't move forward. And so we know that Governor Cuomo was the first governor to make P-TECH a statewide replication. And we see the difference in New York State's Business Council working with New York State, but that's not the same replication that we see in New York City. We see definitely a slower pace, and that's because it's more about politics and not about progress. So we have to really be honest and hold our elected officials accountable and call them out on it. I mean, that's what we really need to do when we talk about inclusiveness, when we talk about really opening up different pathways. We can't open up different pathways as fast as we need if our elected officials are saying something that's counterproductive to those partnerships.
And Rasheed, we know that businesses want this. It's not an education imperative, it's also an economic imperative to bring new talent into the economy.
Yes.
This panel was about also, to some extent, silver linings from COVID and positive things that can come out of it. when you spoke, Andy, about localization versus globalification, and this is bigger than just all-star, but teaching coding. But as I think about skilled versus unskilled labor, and a hope for the future, I do hope, and speaking about policy, like Rasheed said, that this can perhaps lead to better compensation and appreciation for unskilled labor, because we found with essential workers, that working people, but who are essential workers, are doing unskilled labor. Our grocery store cashiers, our delivery people play a crucial role in society that that capitalism just hasn't been rewarding. And of course we're riding a trend of teaching more skills. That's why I'm doing this. Yet at the same time, I think I'm hoping that we can all see that actually unskilled labor, but that the willingness to do it is really valuable and should be much more highly compensated.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's also opening up opportunities for more and more opportunity youth and adults from non-traditional backgrounds to have, and I think you mentioned this earlier, Christina, to be lifelong learners. How do you build new skills for future jobs? I think that's also really critical.
Yeah.
We have 3 minutes left. I want to, and you're right, Michael challenges us to think about silver linings here and hope, and we absolutely have heard some through the outcomes of PTEC, the amazing work that you're all doing. Andy talking about that school. I just want to close it out by seeing if anybody wants to share some more words of hope before we close our session.
I literally, Grace, before this panel, I had a conversation with our IBM liaison and our City Tech liaison and one of our assistant principals, and we were looking at, upwards of 15 students who will be completing their associate's degree this June, even through COVID. And so we're talking about young people who are making those shifts, raising their hands high enough to be reached. And so I want people to remain hopeful that this is challenging, but we have to really be courageous and do the work that we know matters. And once again, progress over politics.
I would say that your battle is your bridge. I think each of us, someone said something the other day, while we're all going through this pandemic, we're all in different boats. I love that, because I think you've got to assess where are you in with respect to your boat, what kind of enhancements do you want to make in the future, and what are you going to do about it? But your battle is your bridge. And when you fight, and when we all fight through this thing, we'll be on the other side. So that's my silver lining.
Great. Thank you all. I think, talking to each of you and from your different perspectives, I think this can give our audience a lot of hope that we've got really stellar leaders who are moving us all forward and ensuring that young people, especially the most vulnerable, have opportunities to move through the education to employment pipeline. Ooh, we lost Rasheed. And I want to thank you all for your engagement today, for sharing your expertise. And I want to thank our audience. Wish we could have all seen you in person, but hopefully we'll be doing that in the coming months, and certainly in 2021. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful rest of the summit.
Thank you, Grace.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks, everyone. Shout out to the educators. Great job.